So it's great to see you all here today. The Rutgers 250th event is really exciting, so I'm glad to introduce our speaker, Tom Frusciano. He's been at Rutgers University since 1989. He currently serves as a university archivist, as well as a part-time lecturer with the School of Communication and Information, where he's taught courses on archival management and archives and technology, to name a few. Prior to coming to Rutgers, he served as a university archivist at New York University and as an assistant archivist at the Educational Testing Services in Princeton, New Jersey. He's been involved in a number of publications, including the Rutgers University Football Vault, History of the Scarlet Knights, and is the primary author of Rutgers, a 250th Anniversary Portrait. He's an active member of the library faculty here at Rutgers and has participated in a variety of projects that promote the history of Rutgers, including Rutgers Oral History Archives Program and the Rutgers Living History Society, where he serves as Vice President and Historian. Please welcome Tom Frusciano.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Ashley, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to address you, especially during this wonderful year of 250th anniversary celebration. I think you've heard about it. I hope you're all parents of Rutgers students. I would take a quick poll. How many people are Rutgers alumni here? Quite a few, so you have your own perception and history of Rutgers, especially through the time that you were here. We were having a nice conversation with a couple here before, and they were talking about the 1980s and what Rutgers was like. The 250th anniversary actually began for us in Special Collections and University Archives, which is the unit that I work in here in the library, Rutgers University Libraries. And we really began planning for the 250th about probably 4 or 5 years ago. I had the opportunity when I was working at NYU that I walked in during their 150th anniversary. So I just kind of like got an exposure to what goes on with an institution during its anniversary year. So I kind of learned a lot of lessons from that. I was trying to convince people here we have to start planning early. Plan early. It's going to come on before you know it's going to be here. Of course, I was the only one saying that, and of course, and folks in our unit, but nobody else was really listening except for one gentleman by the name of Matt Weissmantel, who's the senior director of the Rutgers 250 office, and he knew exactly what I was saying. Of course, he was also petitioning, getting himself in line to become that director, and he was going to be responsible for a lot of the activities that took place during this year. But things got really in gear about 3 years prior to the opening, which occurred last November, with a number of projects, a number of publications, and a number of other public events that have now since either taken place or will take place and will all end basically on November 10th of this year, which is the actual signing of the original charter that brought Rutgers into existence. What I have here is a whole lot of slides, and I will probably go through some quickly, and others I will maybe stop and we'll talk a little bit more. I like to do this very informally, so if you have questions, stop me. I do this for the new student. This is part of the new student orientation and family program. I do this lecture this talk I do for the new student orientation leaders. And we always have a great time, and the students are just wonderful because they're asking questions, I'm asking them questions, they're trying to beat each other to the answers, and we have a lovely time. I had to do this talk for the foundation this past year. I've done this about 10 times. And I gave a presentation for the foundation, but they told me I only had 20 minutes. So I had to do 250 years of history in 20 minutes. And I had to do it twice in concurrent sessions. I got it done. There was no Q&A. We just got it, I went to zip through it. But then with the students, we went 2 hours because it was just a lot of this informal talking. So anyway, so I'm going to start this. And I think people may recognize this image. Where is it located? The Patrick Chapel is one of the chapel windows. And it signifies the signing by William Franklin, the last royal governor of the colony of New Jersey, and signing the charter that brought into existence Queen's College, which is the original name of Rutgers. It's an interesting view because I don't think this ever actually happened. I don't think historians have never, including Richard P. McCormick, I don't think they ever said that anyone really gathered with the royal governor to do a Senate signing. But it's still interesting in a way, and of course it gives you that colonial feel. And a lot of people have always asked me, what's going on with the guy with the hat in the right-hand corner? So he's got his tri-corner hat. And a lot of people don't notice that, and in fact, the first person who brought that to my attention, I said, that's really interesting. And someone came up, I forget who it was, but they came up with an idea of what that represents, and it's a really good one. It's probably representing the Frelinghuysen family. And Theodore Frelinghuysen is one of the Reformed ministers who actually went to Holland to argue for the establishment of an academy for the Reformed Dutch Church, and never made it back. He perished on his way back, sailing back from Holland, where he was actually just rebuffed. They did not want to hear about this over in Amsterdam. So I think maybe that might signify, or kind of represent the Frelinghuysen effort that brought Queen's College into existence. As most people know, if they know anything about the history of Rutgers, is that Rutgers is one of the 9 original colonial colleges. And here this gives you just a view of the chronology of those institutions and when they came into existence. And you'll see Rutgers is the 8th of the 9 colonial colleges. And what's unique about this group there's a lot of things that are very unique about these group of institutions. Many of them, obviously, we identify with the Ivy League of today. Majority of them are private, except for Rutgers and William and Mary, they become public institutions. All of them have some kind of religious denominational foundation to them. And what's really unique about New Jersey is that we're the only colony that had 2 colleges. We had the College of New Jersey, which becomes Princeton, it's founded in 1746, and then of course Rutgers was originated as Queens in 1766. Again, going back to the founding, Rutgers owes its existence to a group of Reformed ministers who really were trying to just to gain kind of a church authority within the colonies. Everything had to be decided within Amsterdam, which included the education and the ordination of ministers for the colonies. There was through the Great Awakening, which took place in the 18th century, there was a proliferation of churches and not enough pastors to be at those churches. To become a Reformed minister, you had to go travel to Amsterdam. That was a long, arduous, and dangerous journey. And on the way back, as I said, Theodore died petitioning for an academy on American soil, but also 3 of his other brothers died either in coming back after their ordination, 2 from smallpox. So it was very dangerous, and so they really wanted to try to argue to establish that authority in the colonies. And to go along with that, we wanted to establish an academy or a college that would be able to train ministers for those churches. And there was a group of Reformed ministers established in New York City who opposed that. They did not want to give up the authority of Amsterdam. They wanted to be able to still relate to the and be governed by the authorities in Amsterdam. But the Reformed or Progressive, however you want to call it, these ministers, they prevailed and were able to convince William Franklin to issue a charter, which he did in the name of the English crown in 1766, and it's named after the Queen Consort, Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg. The original charter had never been located. My dream of this year was to find the charter. The original charter would have made the New York Times, would have better time than the 250th anniversary. I'm still confident someone's going to find some remnants of that original charter. We have no idea what happened to it, if it ever was recorded. There's speculation. I talked to Richard P. McCormick many years ago about it, and he actually took a trip to England to actually microfilm all documents that were in the UK that related to New Jersey, especially during the colonial era. He looked for it, didn't find it. Subsequent folks have traveled and could not find it. But we know there was something that existed in the basis of a charter. My speculation is that when the Revolution came and William Franklin, who was a loyalist, and also, as you noticed, the illegitimate son of Benjamin Franklin, and father and son did not get along politically, obviously. But William was arrested and he was imprisoned in New York City, and there was a major fire in one of the warehouses where presumably his material, his belongings, his possessions were housed. And so it could possibly have been a lot of state papers that he had that may have gone up. Others say that when he finally was exiled to London, that he threw everything overboard. It's all speculation. But we know something about, because this document, which is in the archives, and it's dated 1769, it was a petition by some of the original trustees of the college who were named in 1766. There was some issues with the original charter that affected the ability to raise funds in New Jersey and New York, and there was a problem with it. So they petitioned Franklin to amend the original charter, and instead what he did was issue the new charter. This one dated in March of 1770. And it's under this charter, with many, many changes, obviously, through the years, where Rutgers has existed. And what's interesting at this document is that the actual charter did not come into our possession until 1908, I believe it is. that it was for sale at some market. There was a physician from New York named Samuel Purple who had a copy. He was selling. He collected a lot of Dutch history and material, and he had a copy of this charter. And he offered it, and I guess a dealer who was working with Purple offered it to Rutgers, and so Rutgers paid $50 for this an original of the 1770 charter. It was a great article that one of my colleagues, Karen Raddick, wrote in the recent journal of the Rutgers University Libraries, which you can get online. And I also have an article in there, but the focus is really on Henry Rutgers. We'll get to him in a little bit. All right, so what happens is this, college is founded, they reissued a new charter in 1770, and it took them about a year before they actually were able to begin instruction. They were able to lease property from Philip French, who was probably one of the most extensive landowners in the city of New Brunswick, and they started in a tavern called the Sign of the Red Lion, which was presumably on the corner of Albany and Nelson Street. And there was a tavern which the college acquired, and under the direction, and so here's just the view of 1832 view of New Brunswick. The decision to select New Brunswick was interesting because many years ago, New Brunswick was in a bid for Princeton. Because Princeton was moving from Elizabeth and coming down looking for it. And there was a battle between Princeton, the township of Princeton, and New Brunswick. And the way they decided was to see who could offer a better deal, basically. A very good Jersey deal, and Princeton went out because they were able to provide more money, more land, and more wood, because it worked for fire. So they beat out New Brunswick in that competition back in the 1750s. So they did the same thing for determining where Queens College was going to be located. It was between Hackensack and New Brunswick, both very large centers of the Dutch population in the colony, at the time. And so by a vote of 10-7, the trustees selected New Brunswick over Hackensack. So that's why we're here. Here, this is the only kind of representation of the sign of the Red Lion we could find, because it ultimately becomes the City Hotel. And if we found this etching somewhere, it's the only thing we can really find. I'd love to be able to find a photograph even in later years. I think the hotel was also known as the Albany Street Hotel. I think it was in existence through the 1920s before it was knocked down. To instruct these young students of Queens College, and also the grammar school, which was established a few years before the instruction began here for the college, General Frederick Frelinghuysen, he was hired as the first tutor of Queens College. And he was all of 19 years old, I believe, when he began teaching. Coming from that prominent Frelinghuysen family, he was a graduate of Princeton, and basically established the curriculum and the way things went according to that school. The best evidence we have is this pamphlet that gives rules and regulations that actually govern the college during the early years. This is dated 1787 and published a year later, and it kind of gives you all basically the curriculum that the students had studied, books that they were required to learn from, and even rules and regulations governing their behavior in the city of New Brunswick. There was no residence hall. There wasn't a residence hall of Rutgers until 1890 with Winans Hall. So basically they lived in boarding houses within the city, or if they were able to commute close by, they would commute from home. But there was strict rules about what they do. When Frelinghuysen decided to go study law, this gentleman, John Taylor, took his place. They both graduated, I think, in the same class at Princeton. And then Taylor wound up teaching intermittently, because when the revolution approaches, many of them go off and join the militia. But he taught on and off until around 1790. When the revolution did take place, and we have evidence of what occurred, and of course the British took over New Brunswick, and the college had to flee and move north into Somerset County further, and they occupied various places where they were able to continue conducting classes on and off. And one of the evidence of what occurred during these years is recorded in this book. And this is it's called the Laws and Regulations of the Athenian Society, and also known as the Transactions of the Athenian Society. This was an early literary society that the students established under the direction of Taylor, who was part of this literary society in Princeton. So a lot of things are patterned what took place in Princeton. And what we have in several pages further are entries that General Howe has landed at Sandy Hook and moving toward New Brunswick. Every able-bodied man should join forces to fight the crown. So there's a lot of that goes in through these transactions. We're jumping ahead here. Queens College went without a president from 1771 until 1786. It was basically governed by members of the trustees for that period of time. Jacob Hardenberg becomes the first president, actually accepts in 1786, but he is involved in the founding of Queens College going back through the 1760s and 1770s. He was a minister from upstate New York who wound up coming into New Jersey, actually married the widow of John Frelinghuysen, another Frelinghuysen, who was a minister, one of the brothers of the Frelinghuysen family, and he was basically he was actually kind of running the trustees at the time, and then he went back to New York State to accept the pastorate by where he lived, and ultimately accepted a call from the trustees to assume the presidency. He served until 1790. Speaking of the Revolutionary War, one of our most illustrious, there's always one graduate who kind of really surfaces, if you look at Rutgers history, who really kind of pops out at you for a particular time period. And I would say Simeon DeWitt probably is the most illustrious of the graduates from the 18th century. Graduated in 1776, went on to become George Washington's geographer. He mapped the route to Yorktown. That turned out to be the last major battle of the Revolution. He was at the Battle of Saratoga, and we have wonderful letters in our collection that describes that battle. And then he became a cartographer and was working in New York State. He was involved in the Erie Canal. He was involved in much of what was going on with the western lands up in upstate New York. And he also was a member of a 3-member commission that actually presented the plan to develop the streets in Manhattan. It was a commissioner's plan. That's pretty famous. And then John Rundell went and designed the grid for the island of Manhattan. In 1790, around that period of time, Rutgers assumes a second home. And this was just a kind of a plain private house, which was on the corner of Livingston Ave and George Street. And this was occupied for a number of years until we get this building. And this building is what exists now. It's called Old Queens. It used to be known as the Queens Building, designed by John McComb, who's a fairly well-known architect of New York City. One of his greatest accomplishments was Federal Hall in New York City. So you see Federal Hall, that's a McComb designed building. Ground was broken in 1809, and we were able to open for instruction in 1811. Classes began there. Now what happens is Rutgers has a couple of periods where it stopped, it closed, mostly because of financial reasons. The first was in 1795, where the enrollments were low, the money was not coming in terms of subscriptions from members of the Reformed Church, who they really relied on. And so what happened, the one last vestige of trying to survive was a failed merger with Princeton. There was a proposal to merge with Princeton, where Princeton would assume undergraduate education and Queens College would be more of a theological seminary, but also would maintain its grammar school as well. But that was defeated by the trustees even before Princeton deliberated to talk about it. So what they come up with an idea, so they closed the college in 1795, but they were able to reopen in 1807. They struck a deal with what was known as the Synod of the Reformed Church, which was the governing body of the church. And they worked out what was called the Covenant of 1807, which allowed the college to reopen. But by that case, also much of the authority of the college was transferred to the church. So the church had more power over the college than the trustees did at that time. One of the ways of trying to raise funds was through lotteries, similar to what we do now. Because I never know where that lottery money goes. I always thought it was supposed to go to education, but I don't see much going on. Well, they did run a couple of lotteries, one in 1812 and then one in 1824, I believe. And these were conducted similar to how lotteries are conducted. And of course, being in New Jersey, probably happened elsewhere, there was some mismanagement took place by the lottery company. And the government basically investigated, and so they had to shut down the lottery. And I'm not sure how much money was incurred, but they were able to open up the school in 1807, and this helped keep it going for a few more years. But by 1816, there was another decision to be made. Finances were pitiful. There's no way they could continue giving instruction, so they had to make another decision. What do we do? So it was voted on to close the college again in 1816. And ironically, and you'll love this one, is that this gentleman, Henry Rutgers, was serving on the trustees at this time. He was appointed in 1815, came to New Brunswick twice. He only attended 2 meetings. But at one of those meetings, the crucial decision whether the college would exist or close was taken. And Henry voted in favor of closing the college. Little we know that 10 years later, it would be renamed after him. But he actually he voted along with others to close the college. Henry Rutgers is fascinating because he's a longtime New Yorker. Has very, very limited association with the state of New Jersey. Very limited with Rutgers College or Queens College at the time, but he did serve on the trustees. He also served on the Princeton trustees for a point in time. But he was a very wealthy bachelor. If you travel around lower behind Canal Street in Manhattan, you'll see all sorts of street signs: Henry Street, Rutgers Street, Catherine Street was the name of his mother. All those streets, he owned all this property. He probably, besides James Delancey, who was probably the other wealthiest New Yorker. Henry was probably one of the wealthiest New Yorkers at this time. His family made money within the brewery industry. They started a brewery up in New York State. They brought it down to Manhattan, and they had a very prosperous brewery going. And Henry would help his father, but when he inherited the business, and it was the time of the American Revolution, he had to vacate his property. The British took over his land and all the other land. And upon returning to his property after the end of the war, he was no longer going to be in the brewing industry. What he did was he got into land leasing. So he leased a lot of land, and that's why he made a ton of money. But he was also very benevolent. He would give parcels of land to various churches. And this map shows modern day, what we were calling Henry's Hood. And we used to do, actually, we got very interested about Henry Rutgers, and it actually came out with a Star Ledger article that was talking about a kind of really a cemetery, a revolutionary cemetery and church in Belleville, New Jersey, that was in disrepair. And it was a kind of a plea that something should be done. And they found a Rutgers stone amongst this cemetery. And it turned out there is a Jersey Rutgers branch up in that area. But everybody thought it was Henry Rutgers. So it was assuming that Henry Rutgers was buried in New Jersey. Well, and it came back even to me, and I'm saying, no. And I have a lot of experience at NYU. I learned a lot about New York history. And I'm saying, there's no way Henry Rutgers would be buried in New Jersey. He was a New Yorker through and through. He was on the Common Council. He was a part of the state legislature. He had this great public career in New York. So this one person, John Pearson, who worked at the Rutgers Foundation at the time, gathered a committee. This is what academics do. You gather a committee and you study it, you investigate the problem. So through a couple of meetings we had and bringing in local people, and then we also had the services of the Rutgers Law Clinic from the law school up in Newark, and they did a lot of legal research. And lo and behold, we find that Henry was buried not once, not twice, but 3 times. Because as Manhattan was moving north, he was buried in one church cemetery, and then when they disinterred him and moved all the body, he was brought to another cemetery further north, and as that development, he winds up in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, which makes sense because there's a lot of very famous people there. So in discovering that, they had a wonderful celebration. They contacted Greenwood. Everything is now computerized. They have all these databases and indexes. So they, Rutgers plot, and they gave them where to go. So they had the Rutgers magazine. I think this is from the Rutgers magazine. No, okay. They did a story on this a number of years ago. I think it's available online as well. If you could just go to the Rutgers magazine online, you'll see there's a story walking with the colonel. I think that's the name of it. Anyway, so that's kind of an interesting story. And a lot of what people say is he gave money to a lot of these churches, which he did, and we actually did a walking tour of the churches with the Rutgers alumni group from New York City. But it's also, he also gave money to the college, to Queens College, and he gave a $5,000 bond to the church, the interest of which went to the college. Now people think that he gave the money, and because he gave the money, Queens College was renamed Rutgers, but it was the other way around. Philip Milledor, who becomes the next president of Rutgers during this period of time, in 1825, he's the one who suggests that the name of the school should be changed to Henry Rutgers. He was a devout Christian, represented all the wonderful characteristics that would signal a new beginning as we reopened Queens College in 1825. So it was at Miller's request that it was approved by the trustees to rename Queens College in honor of Henry Rutgers. And then a year later he gives the money as well as the bell that's up in the cupola at Old Queens. So Miller takes over the reopening of the college in 1825, now known as Rutgers College, and never closes ever again. At least we hope not. I don't think. All right, this is kind of interesting. I'd like to talk about this quickly. This is one of the earliest commencement programs we have. Now you get that nice big book, and it gives all the list of all the graduate students, their dissertations, and the honors and the honorary degree recipients. This is a simple broadside, one page. This is for July 1827, which was the first commencement when they opened up the college again in 1820, but it's the one they conducted. And I always love it because if you look, I don't know if you can see that, but the first person in line in the procession is the janitor. Very important. Now, and I learned this when I was at NYU because it's the same thing. The janitor led the processions there. And I'm saying, yeah, it's interesting, But the janitor knew everything, ran the building, because most of these early colleges only had one or maybe one or two buildings. And so he was in charge of the building. He was in charge of, if there was residents within that building at a particular college, that janitor was in control of those young men, and as well as the dining facilities and all that. So he's a very, very important figure in the life of the college. So he leads a procession followed by the students, and then eventually you get around to the governor of the state of New Jersey and other distinguished guests in the clergy. So when Queens opens up, Queens College, the building itself is the only building that exists on campus until 1830. 1830, Alexander Johnson Hall, which is actually on the corner of College Ave in Somerset. Somerset. That is the second oldest building, and that was built for the grammar school. To get the young Rugrats out of the college building and get them in their own building, and so they built Alexander Johnson Hall for the grammar school, which was associated with Rutgers right up to 1957 before they split and then opened their own campus on Eastern Avenue. But the second real academic building is Van Ness Hall. It sits next to Geology Hall if you walk around the old Queens campus. The students don't do it because they have no reason to go there, unfortunately, as we were talking about. But it's a wonderful small campus of the college, of the university. So this was built in 1845, and it really kind of really helped out in terms of alleviating the space problems in Old Queens and moving the academic program more over. So I'm skipping a lot here. Of course, we're missing the whole thing with the Civil War, but and that's a key point in time because there was 3 Confederate students that went. Princeton had a ton of students that returned to the South to fight for the South. Rutgers only had, I think, 3 of 160 total people who served during the Civil War. So then, past the war, William Henry Campbell becomes president. He's another reform minister from upstate New York, and he's probably the most influential president of the 19th century. And he takes over just at the time when, I think the next slide, when all during the 19th century, as I said, the church really was the authority. They governed the college up to this time. But there was always moved because the theology professors of the seminary, which really begins in 1810 when John Livingston comes to college, they're doing a lot of the teaching in the collegiate part of the college. They're doing the seminary, the theology instruction, but they're also doing a lot of the classical, the Latin, and early instruction in math and early sciences. And the governing body of the church didn't like that. It really wanted to move the responsibility of teaching in the college away from the theology professors. Well, then part of it, and that's a way of starting to sever the ties with the church. So it's become successful by the 1860s. And one of the pushes that happened was that it was so overcrowded with the seminary students and the collegiate students in Old Queens that they finally were really trying to push. The students had to really kind of ask for more room, some space or so. And they were able to get a donation. The church got a donation from a woman named Anna Herzog from Philadelphia, who gave money so they were able to build this structure, which is Herzog Hall. It was called Theological Hall. It was named after her husband, Peter. And this sits on what was known as, some of the older graduates may remember here in Holy Hill, which is where the seminary was. And the seminary grew in building. There was about 12 buildings in the seminary over time into the 20th century. Now they are down to the new seminary building and Gardner Sage Library, which is a beautiful building. And all that property now that is occupied by the Honors College and the new academic student life. And it's chock full of not just a story, but there's lots of text boxes that pull out certain features in Rutgers history. There's a lot of photographs, made some beautiful reproductions. And I wrote copies of those just if you wanted to look at them. And then what you're going to see, hopefully within the next 5 minutes on your way out, is our exhibit, Rutgers Through the Centuries. And the exhibit actually begins downstairs on the B level, and that's our gallery. And the 18th and 19th century story is told very briefly, because it's a small gallery, but it has some very interesting, unique items that we have from the archives. And it continues in Gallery 50, which is right here in the lobby. When you come in, you see the information desk right next to it. There's a small, there's a room there, and it's a gallery. It's called Gallery 50, named because of the gift of class of 1950. We call it Closet 50 because it's very small. So we're hoping for new gallery spaces whenever we get to renovating this building again. So the highlight of the 250th, which was something that was in the works for years, and as you'll probably know if you follow, that Bill Waters was finally invited to be the commencement speaker, and in the last minute, well, Bill, you're not doing that. We'll still pay you, and you can speak to the School of Arts and Science. We had Barack Obama that day. And that was really quite a highlight and quite a day for Rutgers and its celebration. So again, with our logo, revolutionary for 250 years, and I promised my son and daughter-in-law I have to put this image in. This is the newest Frusciano, who his mom and dad are Rutgers graduates, so his aunt and uncle out in Colorado are Rutgers graduates, and so she sent me this thing, I'm putting that in the slideshow. And that is it. Go.